The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. My name's Adrian Benjamins, and I'm joined by Neil Rochlani. Neil, how are you?
Doing great, Adrian. How are you this Friday morning?
Doing pretty good, man.
We've got some fantasy news. We've got some real basketball news, which could impact fantasy, which is great because I was really concerned about what the heck we were going to talk about today. So the NBA, the 365-day league keeps going. So this is great.
You know, I'm really glad. As soon as Summer League ends, it's probably the worst time of the year because then we've got roughly a month period with nothing until preseason starts gaining some steam. So we're probably about to hit that period where it's like the least amount to talk about. So you're right. I'm really glad that we got some news. Where should we start?
I mean, if we're going to do free agency to kind of go with the theme of the week, I think the biggest signing yesterday was Isaiah Thomas to the Nuggets. At least from a fantasy impact, that's still one of the big names out there. And I saw your tweet yesterday about how this might affect that backcourt. Well, let's start with Isaiah Thomas. And I don't want to get into the details of why they might have done this. I guess I'm more concerned of trying to just understand how the fantasy impact is going to be for him playing in Denver now and what his minutes might look like, and therefore following that, what his statistics might look like. I am deliberately just saying nothing because I'm trying to figure it out in my head. Do you have a direction to go on this? I don't know. I don't imagine him.
So
is he going to start? Do we know what's going to happen there? Okay, go ahead.
We're not 100% sure what's going to happen. I believe that Jamal Murray is their guy. So, this move from a reality standpoint makes some sense. They got a solid point guard in Isaiah Thomas. I mean, let's not forget, it wasn't too long ago. This guy finished as number 5 in MVP voting. When he had that year in Boston, he was great. So from a reality standpoint, this makes some sense. Now, fantasy-wise, we hate when this happens because Denver's a team that's got a lot of great fantasy assets. Jamal Murray was fantastic last year. Gary Harris is a guy that we love. Will Barton. So I think that this move is gonna ding these guys a little bit. We know that Isaiah Thomas is a great scorer, ball-dominant scoring guy. So Isaiah Thomas, fantasy-wise, he doesn't really need much time to be fantasy relevant. In 24 minutes, let's say low 20s minutes, he could put up, some usable fantasy stats. I'm not thinking anything high-end, so I think Isaiah Thomas could be worth taking a flyer on, late in drafts. And I just really hope he doesn't ding Jamal Murray, Gary Harris, and those guys too much. I don't know. What do you think about it, Neil?
Yeah, I'm looking at the stats from last year. So last year he played about 27 minutes a game. And
so
go ahead.
Look 2 years back. Look in that year where he was with the Celtics. Because, this guy finished, I believe he was finished 5th in MVP voting. I believe that year he led the league in fourth quarter scoring. We just had an amazing year. Now, a lot of that had to do with Brad Stevens' very friendly point guard offense. So, those numbers were kind of bolstered by playing in a very good system for point guards. But man, this guy, Isaiah Thomas, has been great everywhere he's been. I mean, except last year on the Lakers. But I think from a reality standpoint, it's a great move. But from a fantasy side, we kind of hate to see moves like this, right?
Yeah, I felt like they had the Nuggets pretty much understood, or at least as good as any other team. And now this when you throw in a guy who's a high usage, high scoring, all dominant player. I do know that he's reuniting with his old coach Mike Malone from Sacramento when he really first kind of um, busted out there and became a starter in the NBA. And I'm wondering how Mike's going to use him. Yeah, I'm looking at his numbers. So in Boston, those 2 years, he was at 32 and then 34 minutes. Um, and he obviously scored a lot more points, 29, 22 respectively, along with 6 assists basically in both those games. So, or both those years. So I don't know what is a good benchmark. It's going to be really challenging for me to predict him until I think I'm going to have to. So most of my drivers and predictions, when I'm trying to figure out fantasy stats, is really minutes. That's the primary driver when I'm trying to figure out how to fit someone in addition to so many out of the categories. But if the minutes are down, then obviously the statistics are going to be down. So I think he's going to be, just off the top of my head, I have to say he's going to be like in the high 20s. I don't, maybe he gets into the 30s. We'll have to see his role. And if that's the case, I think he'll go. I think he'll produce at like a low end starter value in fantasy, somewhere around 75 to 100. I think he'll get drafted earlier, though. I think his name is just way too high for him to stick around that late in a draft. So we'll have to see how it plays out, where his story gets hyped. Is this someone you like having on your fantasy team? How do you feel about him on your fantasy team? I know, like, for percentages wise, he's a little tough. Like the field goal percentage last year was bad, although he had a great year in the 17th season in Boston at 46%. But other than that, he's been pretty low end shooter.
To be honest with you, have never owned Isaiah Thomas for fantasy, and the main reason is my draft strategy is I go point guards really early. So usually by the 6th, 7th round, I've locked up all of my point guards, and he's just never someone that I really look at. By the time he comes off the board, I've usually locked up my point guards. But I think one thing that we need to take account, this is a 1-year deal in Denver, so this upcoming year, he's playing for his future. So he's going to be very motivated. So look for him to be very aggressive. If he's healthy, I think he can play very well. Now, it just makes a lot of sense for him to be coming off of the bench. Jamal Murray, he's kind of developed this relationship with Nikola Jokic and Gary Harris, and so it seems like Jamal Murray's their guy, their number one guy. I think this whole move is just kind of to give their roster some depth, especially in the backcourt. So I still think Jamal Murray's the guy, but Isaiah Thomas, even in a bench role where he's getting minutes in the low to mid 20s, I think he can still be fantasy viable. So let's see what happens. Not someone I'm going to be targeting early in drafts for sure, but I'm okay with round 7 or later. I'm okay with taking a shot on him. For me, it would even have to be much later than that, though. I don't know. What do you think, Neil?
I agree. It's got to be pretty late. I think his upside is only going to be there if Murray gets hurt or someone else in the lineup gets hurt. I think my initial thoughts are he's going to be, as I kind of think through this a bit, he may be like the guy that comes off the bench as like the Lou Williams type guy.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best analogy I can think of, where he comes off the bench and he provides a spark, and when he's there, he's kind of just the running everything and really putting up high numbers. And we saw, or putting up high usage in those minutes. And we saw Lou Williams put up fantasy relevant numbers. So I think Isaiah could be that way, but I think it's just, we don't know, first of all, how they're going to use him, and 2, can he deliver at that still? So I'm probably going to hold off on not drafting him. I mean, if he's there, like once I get into like round 10 or later, I'm really just looking for flyers. So at that point, he would be in my sort of tier of flyers. But yeah, he's not someone I'm going to target in the first probably 9 or 10 rounds.
All right, Neil, let's move on. Another point guard got moved last night. What are your thoughts on Jeremy Lin getting traded to the Atlanta Hawks? This is a really interesting move when it first happened because the Hawks drafted a guy in Trae Young who has looked a lot better in Summer League. They already have a guy, Dennis Schroeder, on the roster. So here we go. They're adding a third point guard. What are your thoughts on this move, Neil?
Yeah, I actually kind of like it for his fantasy value. I think, he's been playing some combo guard, some two guard as well. So I think he could play alongside both those guys in the backcourt. I don't know what Dennis Schroeder's future is. I've read some reports this morning that he might be. I know they've been trying to shop him. I don't know if this makes it more likely they will or not, but so we'll see what happens. But I think Lin is going to be, for me, one of those other players who I might take a flyer on in the last few rounds of a draft. I'll have to see where they expect him to play in terms of minutes and in the rotation. And I mean, my first thought was maybe they have already given up on Trae Young, but that's definitely not true. But I was like, Trae, what happened? Anyway, but no, obviously he's a future and he's going to be there playing all year, and as long as he develops, he'll be there. But I kind of like this for Jeremy Lin. I like to see. I think he's going to get pretty high usage there, or not pretty high minutes there. Like when I say high, I mean like high 20s. So. And I think he's someone who can do many different categories. He can pass, he can shoot, he can hit the three-pointer. He's actually pretty good on defensive stats. So I like him. I like him as a late-round pick.
Yeah, I agree with you, Neil. And, as you mentioned, a lot of buzz that the addition of Jeremy Lin is pretty much means that Schroeder's likely out the door, which is very interesting. So you got to think if Schroeder leaves and that backcourt is split between Jeremy Lin and Trae Young, that both guys can still be viable. Trae Young, very small, a rookie. He's not going to be able to play heavy minutes every single night. So I think there's plenty of there'll be plenty of usage for both guys. And I agree with you, man. When healthy, Jeremy Lin has shown he can be a very nice fantasy asset. But, one thing that always worries me, I'm very aggressive about fading injury-prone guys, and Jeremy Lin has, I can't remember him ever being healthy or him staying healthy for a long period of time. I feel like, man, this guy always gets hurt. But the word from his camp is that he's getting over his knee injury, and he's likely going to be 100% going into training camp, going into the preseason. So, man, I think if everything looks and sounds good from him, going into this preseason, I'd be willing to take a shot on Jeremy Lin as well. Now, it's got to be pretty late for me. It's got to be towards the end of my draft. But likely could be a really sneaky draft pick if you're able to get him late.
Yeah, I'm looking at his numbers from the 16-17 season in Brooklyn. We played 36 games. He only played 24 minutes. He was able to get up 11 shots, shot 44%. Put in 1.63 pointers, shot 82% from the free throw line, 3.8 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 0.4 blocks, 1.2 steals, and 14.5 points. That's really good for someone who's only playing 24 minutes. And I think that's what I would expect him to play in Atlanta, if not more. So he could really produce top 100 value. And you said the last round. I'm sorry. What did you say? What pick were you thinking you would take on him? Like, where would you value in like the spectrum of like the 1 to 150 range? Do you have a number yet, or is this too early?
I mean, for me, it's got to be like last 4 rounds of your draft.
Yeah.
basic.
Yeah, I would probably. I don't know. Assist guys, like he got 5.1 assists. I don't know. Obviously Trey Young is so much more ball dominant. I don't know if that's going to be sustainable, but if he can put up like 3 to 4 assists and get the 0.4 blocks, he's always been a pretty good blocker and decent on steals and 3 pointers. I think I might take him be like 10th round. If he's still there, I think he could potentially be someone like that. It's hard to get someone who's gonna. I talked about this yesterday with Dan. Usually in those later rounds, those are guys that I'm drafting that I could easily drop right away if they don't work out. And there's really they fall into two categories. Either they're kind of like low ceiling guys that are kind of safe, but they're specialists that do pretty good in some categories, or they're guys who are just taking a flyer on and hope they pop, and go crazy. So he's kind of more like that low ceiling guy, but kind of high floor guy that hopefully does okay. So, and if he doesn't, then I would just drop him. So, I mean, beginning the 10th round might be, or 10th round and on might be where I look at him. But this is just also early and speculative. But I've always liked him as a fantasy player. And yes, the injury is a concern. We'll see, obviously, how healthy he is going through this season.
Yeah, as soon as these mock drafts start, we'll kind of circle back to this again. Really curious to see, where he goes in mock drafts, what his preseason ranking is, and just really curious to see how people perceive him. He was just out of the limelight for an entire season, so a lot of people forgot about him. I mean, when I was going through the Nets depth chart the other day, I forgot he was even on the roster. So I kind of wondering if he can fly under the radar a little bit, and you're able to get him late. But now, we'll see if he has a really good preseason. I think there could be some buzz going into drafts on him. So, and he has proven that he can put up some good numbers when he's healthy. So, I could see it going either way. All right, Neil, a little bit more movement. What are your thoughts on the Denver Nuggets sent Kenneth Faried and Darrell Arthur to the Nets? It looks like it was more of a salary dump move. They did get so a draft pick and then Isaiah Whitehead. One very interesting thing is the Nets moving Jeremy Lin and Isaiah Whitehead kind of opened up a little bit of room in their backcourt. But anyways, Neil, what are your thoughts on this whole thing? Kenneth Faried, Darrell Arthur, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be big Kenneth Faried guy because of his energy. He could do a lot in a short period of time. I don't think he's going. But obviously his game has kind of been not keeping up with the modern NBA. It's really hard to play the four if you can't shoot 3-pointers. So I don't know how he's going to fit into this offense going forward. I do like how this opens up. Like Dinwiddie now clearly is going to be the starting point guard. Well, maybe not clearly, but I think he's the best starting point guard they have, along with Russell, and then maybe LeVert in the backcourt. And perhaps Joe Harris plays it too as well. So this is really interesting in terms of, we worried about Brooklyn having too many players and having kind of a logjam and no one's getting to 30 minutes there because they're playing so many players. And now they're starting to dwindle a little bit with Lin leaving, Isaiah Whitehead leaving, and getting these guys who may not get that many minutes, if at all. So I kind of like Brooklyn going forward as a fantasy team. They may have players that now you can sort of project into the 30-minute mark. So I'm kind of excited for Brooklyn in general. I'm not really excited about these two players that much. I have to see if they are looking to, stretch them or keep them or do something else besides have them on their bench. Do you think they're going to be part of the rotation?
No, not at all. I think we'll see them get bought out or stretched or whatnot. So, and as you said, I really love that they're kind of clearing up some of that log jam. And, the Nets are a team I always try to target for fantasy because they run at such a fast pace. Their offense has a very fantasy friendly pace. So, they were so backed up, Neil, in their backcourt that even with these two guys gone, they still got great depth. I mean, they got Alan Crabb, Spencer Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell, Karis LeVert, Joe Harris, as you mentioned. I mean, it's hard to believe that they got rid of two guys and they're still mega deep here in their backcourt. But I do like Spencer Dinwiddie. D'Angelo Russell kind of let me down last year, so uh, I still think he could be good, but I've just kind of, I'm not going to reach on him or target him too high. Alan Crabb is a little up and down, but I like him. Karis LeVert I love his game. Um, if he can just stay healthy and if he can get consistent minutes, like a do it all stuff and things type of guy. So really like him. And then Joe Harris is a guy that we like as well if he can get minutes. So still really crowded still, but really interested to see what happens in the preseason. Who's named the starters, how their rotation shakes out, because definitely could be some good players to target in drafts. What do you think, Neil?
I mean, I like how you brought up that Brooklyn has a fast pace. I think sometimes you forget to look at pace when we're thinking about teams because most of these stats are offensive based, and if teams are running up and down the court faster, you see more assists, you see more points, you see more even potential steals because of the frenetic pace. So, and Brooklyn is one of those fast-paced teams. So we'll have to see who's in the starting lineup, and perhaps this year, guys will get into the 30-minute mark, break the 30-minute mark, which would be very useful for fantasy in terms of how I kind of look at valuing guys. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what happens in Brooklyn. Russell is a really interesting guy to talk about, I guess, when we get into the team breakdowns, because he's someone who obviously was the second overall pick. People thought he could be, the franchise point guard in LA, and then that didn't work out. And now he's in Brooklyn, and he kind of has been overshadowed by Dinwiddie. It's interesting to see what's going to happen to him. If they still give him a chance, he's certainly a guy who's not shy to really take over a game and put up a lot of, as like a high usage guy. So if he does get that role, he could be a late round steal. Because I don't think he has any sort of name buzz anymore in the fantasy world. So it'll be interesting to see what Brooklyn wants to do with him, and also where he gets ranked this coming off season into the fantasy drafts. Do you have anything else to say about Brooklyn or these two guys?
No, I agree with your take on D'Angelo Russell. I'm really interested to see. This is kind of like, I feel like a do or die season for him. He needs to show up this season because, as you mentioned, very high expectations on this guy when he got drafted, and has been really up and down. Had some injury issues. I believe he missed almost 2 months last season. Started the season hot, and then missed like 6 to 8 weeks, then was never really right when he came back. And also the emergence of, as you mentioned, Spencer Dinwiddie kind of overshadowed Russell. So this season's going to be really interesting. I think that organization, they still consider him like their guy. And so I think he's going to get every opportunity to show out. So let's see what happens with Russell. Really curious to see where he gets drafted because, he does have some concern fantasy-wise. Doesn't shoot a great percentage. Has turnover issues when you're playing in 9-cat leagues. So really curious to see where he gets drafted. But he could possibly put up some big numbers. So, I could see it going either way. Very interesting stuff, Neil. The other thing I wanted to touch on was just kind of real quickly what that move meant for the Nuggets moving Kenneth Faried and Darrell Arthur. Kind of the same way the Nets cleared up some room in their backcourt, the Nuggets clearing up some room in their front court. So they had a little bit of a logjam themselves in their front court. So really happy to see, and kind of curious if like a guy like Juan Hernan Gomez can kind of get some extra run. They had a guy who looked really good, and Trey Lyles showed flashes of being a really great player. So I'm really hoping that Juan Hernan Gomez, Trey Lyles can maybe carve out some extra minutes with Faried. I don't know why, man. They were playing Faried way too many minutes. And, you know what, Neil? I'm really glad you mentioned that you liked Fareed, because back in the day, man, when Fareed first came to the league, I was salivating about this guy. Like, his energy, and he was just like a monster on the boards, and just his dunks and everything. And it's so, as you mentioned, how the modern NBA changed. How crazy it was just to see this guy get left in the dust, pretty much. And now, like, there's no demand for his type of skill set now in the modern NBA. Really interesting stuff. But Neil, real quick, what are your thoughts on the Denver Nuggets, like their front court situation?
Yeah, I mean, Fareed, obviously at this point I was avoiding him, and also Arthur really wasn't fantasy relevant. But you're right, and now it gives minutes up to other players, and we sort of have their or at least I think we have their starting five set with their front court of Millsap, Jokic, and I guess Barton's can play the three. And Hernan Gomez, I think, could be a fantasy relevant player if there's an injury, which there always are injuries now and in the NBA, unfortunately. So Trey Lyles, I'm less excited about. I just think Hernan Gomez fits the modern game a little bit better. And what I saw of him last year, I just liked him from a reality perspective. So my one concern, though, is Mason Plumlee continues to get lots of minutes in this front court, which I'm not a big fan of his game and also fitting alongside what the Nuggets are doing. But clearly they like him and they're playing him for a reason. So I don't know what to think about the Nuggets front court yet, except that this is good if you have if you're worried about like a backlog or guys getting too much rest, like Millsap, or not getting enough minutes, or Jokic or something. I think those guys will definitely get now in the low 30s, if not mid 30s.
This team, Neil, very interesting from a reality standpoint. They got some huge stars on this team in Paul Millsap, Nikola Jokic, and Jamal Murray really emerged. Gary Harris. I love Will Barton, and they've also got a lot of depth, as you mentioned, Mason Plumlee. And so, I feel like if this team was in the East, they'd be like a top 5 team, like playoff team. And we're really curious if Paul Millsap is healthy. If this team can make a serious run at the playoffs. Like, we know the Western Conference is stacked, so many good teams. But on paper, man, this team looks really good. Really curious to see what kind of season that they're going to have this year. All right, Neil. Any other thoughts on any movement last night? Or I was thinking maybe we can touch on some summer league news. But any last thoughts on like what happened last night?
Well, yes. One other player I wanted just to touch on briefly was Wayne Ellington in Miami got re-signed.
Oh, nice.
I didn't have him on sort of my. I remember last year hearing other guys here at Hoopball, especially Aaron, talked about Wayne Ellington as someone to pick up there as their backcourt kind of got depleted, and he was putting up some really good fantasy numbers at the shooting guard. I know Waiters is coming back, so I'm not sure how much time Ellington's going to get, but if he does sort of slot into that 6-man role where he gets a lot of minutes and high usage, or if Waiters is not fully healthy, then I guess Ellington could be fantasy relevant again this year. Do you have any thoughts on him?
No, I'm really glad that you brought up Wayne Ellington, because I was shocked that it was taking so long for this guy to get signed. Wayne Ellington shot the lights out last season. He showed that he is an elite 3-point shooter, a great guy to stream if you were targeting threes. And, you would think a guy like that, that there would be high demand for a guy like that all throughout the league. So was really surprised that it took him so long to get signed. But now, Neil, from a reality standpoint, we've been talking about these teams with crowded rotations and log jams. And this is another team, the Miami Heat, Neil, that I kind of hate this team for fantasy because, gosh, I mean, Goran Dragic, Tyler Johnson, Dwayne Wade is still on this roster, Dion Waiters, Josh Richardson. I mean, that backcourt is like Wayne Ellington. That backcourt is so crazy crowded. Even their front court, Neil. James Johnson, Justice Winslow, Whiteside, Kelly Olynyk can be good. A lot of people love Bam Adebayo. They think he can be the future of that front court. This roster is crazy crowded. What do you think about that, Neil?
Yeah, this one's tough to find value. This is where this is where if you really get into the weeds, you can do really well because most people can't figure this out, and I struggle with it myself. But sometimes these deep rosters are really hard to predict. So you're right. There's a lot of players. There's a lot of like really solid players, but no like real great players. So it's hard to know who's going to emerge, except for I guess Josh Richardson, who I think is
Yeah,
an incredible talent, and I think he's going to get plenty of time and put up great numbers this year.
Yeah, I think Josh Richardson's the guy that you want to own. But, you know, what I really hate is that a lot of these players are fantastic fantasy players in the right setting. Goran Dragic, I liked, man, Tyler Johnson given the right usage. Josh Richardson, like, could you imagine if he was on a team, on another team that lacked backcourt depth? He could just go crazy. So I really love these players individually, but then when you bunch them all together, you make them get stuff together in the same room. It's just like, But anyways, really interesting stuff. Really glad that you circled around to Wayne Ellington, because I just thought it was really interesting that, that it took so long for him to get locked up.
Yeah, they're also a slow-paced team, if I'm not mistaken, too. So they're not running up and down the court like Brooklyn. So that's also makes it more challenging to sort of derive the fantasy value from these players. So that's the last thing I want to say. Do you want to head over to topic Summer League?
I really wanted to touch on Summer League real quick. We're kind of running out of time, but there's two guys I wanted to hit up real quick. One is Trae Young. I've been really hard on this guy, but he's really started to come around. At the Utah Summer League was atrocious. Shot it poorly. High turnovers, just played awful. Has really turned it around in Las Vegas. The shooting's been better. He had 7 3-pointers in one of their wins. And man, his passing has been amazing. You said it on one of the previous shows that's the one thing that he looks really good at is passing. And man, he can break down defenses, get to the rim, and then he finds the open man beautifully. So, you mentioned on Twitter, you and I were kind of going back and forth on Twitter, and I was really worried in one of my deep dynasty leagues because I got pick 9. I was really hoping when he was playing, or I was really worried when he was playing poorly that he could fall out of that top 9 because I want someone to pick him in front of me to open up one of these other guys that I'm targeting. And you made the point that, man, he still has a ton of upside and somebody's going to take him. And I agree with you. He's really showing why people believe in him now. Don't get me wrong. For fantasy, I think he's going to struggle this first year. He's going to have a major issue with turnovers. May not shoot a great percentage. So for fantasy, I'm still kind of fading him. But reality-wise and for the future, I could kind of see why everyone was high on this guy. What do you think, Neil?
Well, I'm happy for you that you don't have to. He's not going to be there at number 9 when you pick. So I'm glad it's going to work out. He's someone that I've kind of wanted to stay away from even once I even saw him in college, only because I know he's going to turn over the ball a lot. He just takes a lot of chances passing the ball, and it doesn't work out a lot of times. Sometimes it's really beautiful. Also, his shot he just forces a lot of really low percentage looks from 3. So I know he's got a great potential to be, a really great shooter in this league, but right now he's just really forcing a lot of bad shots, and he misses badly on so many of them. So his percentages is going to be really bad. So unless you're punting field goal percent and turnovers, I would stay away from him.
So, Neil, one last guy that I want to touch on real quick, and you might get really excited about this because it's your team. Man, how have you liked Wendell Carter Jr. so far? I had said, you and I had did a show right after the draft. Like I think it might have been the day after the draft. And I had told you that I thought that, man, the Bulls really lucked into maybe drafting one of the best players in this draft. And one of the reasons why I said that is because, every big in this draft kind of has a deficiency or something to be worried about. Like Ayton, some people say defensively he might not be great. Same thing with Bagley. Bamba, his offensive game might not be there yet. And I thought Wendell Carter Jr. might have been the best all-around big, meaning his defense is there, his offense is there, and man, we are seeing it in Summer League, Neil. This guy blocking a ton of shots. His offense looked great. What are your thoughts on Wendell Carter? Are you excited about this guy?
I am. I was not. I did not know him that well coming into the draft, and I've got to see him play a few times, and I really do like what he's doing in Summer League. I do take everything in Summer League with a grain of salt because it's obviously, sort of like the preseason, even like preseason light. You're not going against the best players, but so far so good. So yeah, I'm really excited about what he's doing on the court. His athleticism is great. He seems he can fit right in with the modern game. So I am looking forward to see how he does in preseason and where they put him. Like, are they going to start this guy? It'll be fascinating to see if he does get a starter's role or what what his usage is going to be. But I still am very hesitant on rookies generally. Like, I don't like the draft in the first 6 rounds. And I'm not sure yet if anyone. I was really curious to see if Doncic could get some minutes, but I don't think he's played any minutes in Summer League. Is he going to be out there? I sorry to change the subject on you, but he's the other one I was thinking about.
I don't think we're going to see Doncic, and the reason is he almost played like a full NBA season in Europe. He played like 80-something games over there for Real Madrid, and he was still playing competitive basketball like up until the draft. He was still he kind of needs a rest basically. And it was so funny, Neil. I was watching the show The Starters, and I don't really know much about that show. It was actually, to be honest with you, my first time watching it. And one of the guys on that show said that he doesn't believe Doncic can be Rookie of the Year because we didn't see him in Summer League. And I think that's just ridiculous, man. We saw him. He was the best player. He was the MVP of EuroLeague, which I feel is on a notch above Summer League. I mean, these are all ex-NBA players, the best players in Europe, competing on a very high level. Like, there's high stakes on the line in these games in Europe, and he was the best player in that league, Neil. He won a championship. So, I mean, I don't think this guy really has anything to prove. I don't, yes, we'd love to see him go off in Summer League, but I don't need to see it. I think I already believe in him. I don't know. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, I'd like to see him play, but sure, what I've seen from the European League, he looks phenomenal. I would have taken him number 1. I think he's, excuse me, I think he's the best player in this class, and looking forward to see how that all plays out. Any other Summer League guys you want to talk about?
Was really disappointed yesterday because a lot of guys ended up sitting. Jonathan Isaac and Mo Bamba and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the Clippers. Just even Trae Young sat out yesterday. So was really disappointed. But really, real quick, some second-year players going off. Josh Hart of the Lakers looking really good. Jonathan Isaac from the Magic. I am salivating over this guy, Neil. This guy can be really good. A fantasy stud. His game is very fantasy friendly. The defensive stats, if his offense comes around, this guy can be a monster. So really nice to see some of these second year players. John Collins has shown out at Summer League. Love that guy for this upcoming season. John Collins likely going to be on my ride or die list for this upcoming season, man. What are your thoughts on any of that, Neil?
Yeah, well, a couple of those guys, I'm glad to see they're playing well. Jonathan Isaac, I thought he might have potential last year, and we'll see where he gets slotted this year. He's obviously someone who can do a lot in a little bit of time because of his defensive stats. I'm glad to see Josh Hart doing well. I liked him coming out of college. I was kind of rooting for him as the guy, who plays 4 years and then he gets into the NBA, and sometimes they don't get the value that they deserve. And he's making a name for himself out there in LA. And so hopefully he continues to do well. I haven't really seen much more and again, summer league is something I take with a grain of salt. So I haven't really seen enough to really say, I think this guy's going to be someone who's fantasy worthy yet. But, I do love watching basketball, and I'm glad it's on every day. So that's all I got.
Yeah, real quick closing thoughts on Summer League. You say you take Summer League with a grain of salt, and that's very wise because, Summer League doesn't necessarily make or break a guy. There's been guys who have had bad Summer Leagues. Derek Favors shot it poorly at Summer League. Draymond Green shot really bad at Summer League. But so, just because a guy does poorly at Summer League, it doesn't mean he's going to have a poor career, and vice versa. Just because guys go off in Summer League, it doesn't mean they're going to be studs in the NBA. So, but you do usually see these guys that, that are highly touted. You do usually see these guys go off on Summer League. Last year, Donovan Mitchell showed out. Jason Tatum played great. So it just kind of validates, the guys that should be great on the NBA level, they should also dominate Summer League. So even though you're absolutely right to take everything with a grain of salt, it is nice to see some validation on all these guys, Jaren Jackson Jr., Ayton, your guy, Wendell Carter. It's nice to see these guys showing out. So, and as you said, man, just really fun to watch some basketball right now.
Yeah,
all right,
these guys are just going at it, which is great. A lot of these guys aren't going to make rosters that are out there, and they're just trying their hardest. So it's kind of cool to see that.
Yep. And Neil, I didn't think we'd have anything to talk about this morning. We've been talking for over 40 minutes, and there's still, I wish we had more time. There's more guys I'd love to talk about, but I think we should wrap this thing up, put a bow on it. I was hoping to keep this show at the 30-minute mark, and we've gone way over. Real quick though, Neil, any plans for the upcoming week? Are you jumping on a jet and going somewhere exotic again?
I wish. I like how you take my trip to the state park. It's jumping on a jet and going across the world. I go to a state park in Indiana and walk around a forest. And you're I do love being out in nature and just kind of getting away from all the technology for a little while. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do this weekend. I had some plans to kind of fall through, so we'll see. But it's just good to relax. How about you? What are you up to?
Man, just relax, man. It's been nonstop over here. Just gonna jump in the pool, try to stay cool. It's super hot over here on the West Coast. The weather's in the 90s, and I'm just gonna try to stay cool and just gonna try to relax. But anyways, Neil, I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for coming on and for chatting with me. It's always great talking to you. And thank you all listeners for joining us. Hey, you guys, please hit us up on Twitter. You can hit Neil at Ball with Neil. You can hit me up at Adrian Benjamins. Send us your questions on the next show. I think we're going to get into some listener questions. All right, everyone. It's been a lot of fun. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.